Have you ever felt that something was wrong? A vague intuition lurking in your mind, but you couldn't quite name it? Have you ever experienced that strange feeling around someone, as if your energy was being slowly drained even when there was no argument or conflict? You try to be kind, understanding, even generous, but inexplicably you emerge from those interactions feeling more tired, more insecure, and more lost than before. And the scariest part? You keep going back. You keep exposing yourself. You keep pretending you don't notice anything unusual. What if I told you that this is not a coincidence? That there are truly people around you, people who pretend to support you, but deep down they hate you. People who cannot stand to see your light and therefore do everything subtly, silently, and strategically to dim your shine. And worse, they know exactly what they are doing while you don't. You are too busy trying to keep the peace, trying to be understanding, trying to show yourself as emotionally evolved, that you don't see the poison dripping from the sweet words. And perhaps that is why you keep being surrounded by people who subtly sabotage you. Because there is still something inside you that refuses to look directly at the truth. Something that prefers clinging to the illusion of a connection rather than facing the abyss of emotional betrayal. But enough. Enough with rationalizing aggression disguised as concern. Enough with accepting emotional crumbs just because you are afraid of being alone. This video is not for those who want to feel comfortable. It is for those who are tired of being manipulated by those who should support them. It is for those who want to learn to identify these false faces, understand what they reveal about themselves, and most importantly, discover how to cut this silent cycle of emotional draining. Because in the end, keeping these people in your life is not a sign of kindness. It is a symptom of self-sabotage. If you've ever suspected someone but never had the courage to confirm, if you feel surrounded by people who wish you well but deep down are hoping for your downfall, then this video is for you. Not to comfort you, but to wake you up. The play of false support and the invisible wound. It's easy to think that your enemies are far away. That danger comes from outside. That betrayal announces itself with shouts, arguments, scandals. But the real problem, the most insidious, the hardest to identify, is when the poison comes disguised as affection. When the hug carries invisible thorns, when the compliment is imbued with repressed anger, and the worst, when the one who stabs you smiles while doing it. The feeling of insecurity and drained energy that you experience is not imagination. It is a signal from your intuition alarming you that something is wrong in those relationships. You may try to use logic to explain it, to find reasons to justify their behavior. Maybe they didn't mean it. Perhaps I'm being too sensitive. But the feeling of fatigue and loss after each interaction is real. It's like a small wound that keeps bleeding slowly. You don't feel intense pain immediately, but over time you gradually lose your strength. These subtle saboteurs rarely attack directly. They know that doing so will make you wary and likely leave. Instead, they adopt a much more subtle and dangerous strategy. They pretend to care about you. They are the colleague who always says you are lucky whenever you achieve something, but never acknowledges your actual effort. They are the family member who says you've changed since you started growing, using that argument to make you feel guilty for evolving. They are the friend who supports you, up to a certain point, until your success begins to highlight their own failure or stagnation. When faced with this contradictory support and these confusing words, you start to doubt yourself. You wonder if you are overreacting, if you are being paranoid, if you are seeing things that aren't there. But the reality is you are seeing, you just don't want to admit it, because admitting it means accepting a harsh truth. That someone close to you, someone you once trusted, could be your emotional saboteur. And tragically, as mentioned before, these people are often masters at turning themselves into victims when you try to create distance. They use emotional manipulation to make you feel guilty, to pull you back into their sphere of influence. This is subtle control. It is emotional vampirism disguised as affection. But why do we allow this to happen? Why do we tolerate this emotional theater? Perhaps, as the original content suggests, because there is something within us that needs it. A part of us feels comfortable in the familiarity of pain, of self-sacrifice, of being needed even when that need is toxic. This is the point where we need to turn the mirror and look deeply within ourselves with brutal honesty. The projected shadow, the hidden corner. According to Carl Jung called this complex and subtle dynamic the projection of the shadow. So what does that mean? It means that people who lack the courage to deal with their own dark feelings, envy, frustration, insecurity, desire for control, will project all of that onto you. They will find disguised ways to belittle you, to pull you down while pretending to support you. Think of the shadow in Jungian psychology as a part of the self that we deny or do not want to acknowledge. Traits, emotions, desires that society deems negative or unacceptable, or simply parts that our ego does not want to face. When we do not process our shadow, it doesn't disappear. Instead, it finds ways to escape, often through projection onto others. Others become the screen onto which we see what we refuse to see in ourselves. In the context of these subtly toxic relationships, the projection of the shadow manifests as subtle sabotage. The colleague who is envious of your success cannot admit that envy within themselves. They cannot say, "I am envious of you because you have worked hard and achieved that." Instead, they project their insecurity and failure onto you by diminishing your effort, attributing your success to luck. In this way, they not only devalue your achievements in the eyes of others and in your own eyes, but they also soothe their own shadow. It's not that I'm inadequate or haven't tried hard enough. It's just that the other person got lucky. The family member who feels threatened by your growth and independence is similar. They may feel the shadow of control or fear of abandonment emerging. They cannot say, "I'm afraid you won't need me anymore," when you are so self-sufficient. Instead, they project their insecurity by making you feel guilty about your change. You've changed. You're not like you used to be, implying that your development is a negative thing. This is intended to pull you back into the old comfort zone of the relationship, where they can still maintain control or a sense of being needed. And what about the friend who supports you only up to a certain point? Their shadow may contain a hidden envy or a fear of being surpassed. When your success crosses a certain threshold and highlights their own stagnation or failure, this shadow becomes unbearable. They cannot genuinely be happy for you without feeling the shadow of helplessness or inferiority within themselves. Consequently, their support becomes lukewarm, even shifting to subtly negative attitudes in order to rebalance their internal emotional scale. The key point is their behavior is not just about you. It is about their own internal struggle with their shadow. But that does not diminish the negative impact they have on you. Because this projection is done subtly, under the guise of concern or affection, it leaves you confused and questioning your own judgment. You get lost in the labyrinth of self-doubt. Am I overthinking this? Or do they really mean it? Admitting this truth is painful, as it means accepting that someone close, someone you trusted, could be the source of your hurt. And tragically, as previously mentioned, these individuals are often masters at turning themselves into victims when you try to create distance. They use emotional manipulation to make you feel guilty, to pull you back into their orbit. This is subtle control. It is emotional vampirism under the guise of affection. But why do we allow the shadow of others to cast over us? Why do we so easily become the screen for their projections? This is when we need to turn the mirror and look deeply into ourselves. The mirror reflecting ourselves. Why do we attract them? We've talked about why they do it, the projection of their own shadow. But the equally important question, and perhaps the most difficult to face, is why do we allow it to happen? Why do we tolerate this emotional theater? Perhaps, as suggested, because there is something within us that needs it. A part of us feels comfortable in the familiarity of pain, of self-sacrifice, of being needed even when that need is toxic. It's easy to point outwards to say the other person is toxic, fake, envious. But Carl Jung warned us of an uncomfortable truth. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves. The problem is never just with the other person. If you consistently attract this type of person into your life, people who drain your energy, belittle you with smiles, sabotage you under the pretense of support, then the question you need to ask is why. There is a part of you that allows this, seeks this, needs this. And it doesn't act out of malice. It acts out of habit, out of trauma, out of unconscious patterns that have formed. Perhaps you grew up in an environment where you were always taught to be available, always understanding, always the good or nice one. Perhaps since you were little, you learned that to be loved, you had to give up a part of yourself. Perhaps you became accustomed to relationships where affection always came with pain or disproportionate sacrifice. So today, unconsciously, you repeat this cycle. You attract people who reinforce that old story. That you are only valuable if you sacrifice yourself, if you please others, if you endure in silence. These fake people around you act as mirrors. They show you the extent to which you still don't stand your ground, how much you fear displeasing others, how much guilt you feel for setting boundaries. And as long as you don't see this, you will continue to call what is actually emotional imprisonment a friendship. You will continue to confuse loyalty with submission, and you will continue to think you are being strong by enduring everything in silence, when in reality you are slowly destroying yourself. Jung said that the encounter with oneself is the only thing that any of us can try to avoid our whole lives. And perhaps that is why you keep these people close, because while you focus on their falseness, you don't have to look at your own omission. While you point out the poison in others, you don't have to face the wound within yourself that has allowed you to be poisoned. But here is the truth you need to hear. These relationships will not change. They exist to force you to change. The other person only stops manipulating when you stop submitting, when you finally recognize your role in this game and decide to exit it. However, before you leave, you need to understand the cost of staying, and that is what we will explore next. The invisible impacts that these relationships silently cause in you, in your body, in your mind, in your soul. The price of silence. Invisible impacts on energy and spirit. Sometimes you only realize the damage when it is already too late. You don't need to be insulted to be hurt. You don't need to be attacked to be destroyed. Sometimes what consumes you is exactly what is not seen, not spoken, not named. Emotional draining does not scream. It whispers. It seeps into the subtext of conversations, in the weight of a gaze that judges you in silence, in the constant presence of someone who seems to love you, but who deep down wants you to be smaller. And that is where the danger lies. These subtle saboteurs will not take anything from you all at once. They will gradually undermine your strength. First, they make you doubt a choice. Then they question your confidence. And over time, you start to think twice before expressing yourself, to censor yourself, to mold yourself so as not to disturb someone. And then one day you wake up feeling empty, tired without having done anything, sad for no reason, anxious without cause, because your energy is already gone, and you didn't even see when that happened. This type of draining affects your mind, your body, and your perception of yourself. You start to feel confused, disoriented, as if something is wrong, but you don't know what it is. You begin to compare yourself to others, to think that you are becoming weak, too sensitive, dramatic. But you are not. You are under attack, an invisible psychological symbolic attack, a wear and tear attack. Jung spoke about the energy fields that form in human bonds. When two people interact, they do not just exchange words, they exchange psychic energy. And when you connect with someone who envies you, represses you, projects onto you everything they refuse to see in themselves. That energy contaminates your field, and no matter how much you try to rationalize, justify yourself, understand the other person's side, your body feels it, your intuition feels it, your spirit feels it. But most people ignore these signs. They prefer to keep adapting, pretending that everything is fine, smiling at those who wish for your downfall. Because confronting this truth hurts. Because admitting that someone close to you is destroying you takes courage. Courage to say enough. And courage, as you will see now, is exactly what you will need to break this cycle. In the next part, we will talk about what happens when you finally see the pattern, when the masks fall, when the truth appears in all its rawness, and what you do from that moment on is what defines whether you free yourself or sink even deeper. The moment of illusion shattered and the challenge of action. Are you ready to face it? The moment you truly see who is subtly sabotaging you is like a snap, a breaking of illusion. It is painful, yes, but also liberating. The curtain falls, the theater ends, and suddenly everything makes sense. The passive-aggressive compliments, the advice that felt more like disguised criticism, that feeling of always being in debt, that no matter how much you do, it's never enough. You finally see the pattern. But then comes the second impact. What to do with this truth? This is where most people get stuck because facing the problem is already a shock. But acting requires strength, courage, positioning. And that is not always easy when it comes to someone you love, live with, or respect. Someone who is present in important moments of your life. Someone who may have even helped you in the past. And because of that, you think you can't distance yourself. But you can, and you should. Recognizing the pattern is the first step, but it means nothing if it is not followed by action. You can spend years reading books, doing therapy, watching videos like this, but if you keep allowing this person to access you, to belittle you, to affect you, nothing changes. Knowledge without action is just intellectual distraction. Carl Jung said, "You do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This means that recognizing toxicity is not enough. You need to act on it. You need to set boundaries, and you need to be ready for the reactions. Because when you start to distance yourself, these people will not accept it easily. They will accuse you of ingratitude. They will flip the blame. They will say you are exaggerating, that you have changed, that you are cold. They know they are losing control over you, and they will fight to keep it. And that is where the real test lies. Will you give in to guilt, to emotional manipulation, or will you stand by your choice until the end? Will you go back to the cycle because you're afraid of seeming too harsh? Or will you, for the first time, protect your energy as if you were protecting your own life? Yes, it is difficult. It will hurt. But failing to take a stand hurts even more, because as long as you do not break this pattern, you keep spinning in circles, reliving the same pains with new faces. In the next part, I will show you how to cut this cycle definitively. How to distance yourself without guilt. How to regain your strength without falling into the emotional game of those who need you to remain weak. It is time to learn to protect yourself, not out of revenge, but for self-love. Self-preservation is not selfishness, it is individuation. Breaking up with someone who hurts you is one of the hardest decisions you will make. Not because you still believe that this person will change, but because deep down you have been conditioned to believe that distancing yourself is synonymous with weakness, selfishness, or ingratitude. That forgiving is always noble, that enduring is a sign of maturity, but here's a truth that no one tells you. Enduring the unbearable does not make you spiritually evolved. It makes you an accomplice to your own destruction. Distancing yourself is not weakness, it is self-preservation. It is understanding that not every bond deserves to be maintained. That there are ties that are not bridges, they are chains. That some relationships are not spaces for growth, they are emotional traps that keep you stagnant, and you owe nothing to those who consume you. Loyalty is not servitude. Love is not unilateral sacrifice. Carl Jung said that we heal to the extent that we stop resisting our own process of individuation. The process of individuation is the journey of becoming who you truly are, a unique individual, separate from the collective psyche and external expectations. And this process requires breakups. It requires you to undo the silent pacts you have with people who wish to keep you small, that you abandon the fear of seeming cold and start protecting your energy with the same intensity that you protect those you love. Because finally, you need to include yourself in that equation. Creating distance is not giving up. It is choosing yourself. It is realizing that your worth is not dependent on how much pain or injustice you can endure. Your worth lies in how much you respect yourself. For many people, this goes against everything they were taught about kindness, forgiveness, and the importance of relationships. But Jung was not talking about being cruel or selfish. He was talking about becoming whole. And you cannot be whole if a part of your energy and soul is constantly being drained and contaminated by others. Creating distance is an act of mental well-being, not cruelty. It is a strong declaration of your autonomy and self-worth. It is reclaiming the power that has been subtly taken from you over time. It is saying to the universe, and most importantly to yourself, that you deserve to be loved, respected, and supported authentically. But how to put this into practice? How to deal with the guilt and the inevitable resistance that will arise? Practical steps: emotional distancing and setting boundaries. How to implement this process of creating distance in practice. Start with emotional distancing. This is the first and most important step. Stop justifying yourself. Stop trying to fix this relationship. Stop explaining. This person knows what they are doing. They just didn't expect you to realize it one day. And when you stop reacting, stop explaining, stop trying to maintain the connection. Their game loses power. Silence in these cases is more powerful than any speech. You don't need to argue or convince them about their behavior. Your job is to protect yourself. This means not sharing too much personal information, not letting their opinions affect your emotions, not engaging in manipulative conversations, changing the subject when they start belittling you or criticizing others, refusing to help or do things that make you feel used, or simply ending the conversation when you feel your energy being drained. You don't need to give lengthy explanations for your reasons. Simply say, "I'm not comfortable talking about this," or "I need to go now." Setting boundaries will likely provoke a reaction from them. They may feel threatened, rejected, and will try to pull you back through emotional manipulation, guilt, victim playing. This is when you need to be firm. Boundaries are not about punishing them, but about protecting you. Remember why you are doing this: for your own mental health and energy. Establish clear boundaries. Perhaps you cannot cut contact immediately. Perhaps this person is part of your family, colleagues, or social circle. That's okay. But that doesn't mean you need to continue exposing yourself emotionally. Learn to protect what is yours, to shield your energy, not to fall into the trap of false affection again. Boundaries can be limiting the time you spend with them, not participating in negative conversations, changing the topic when they start to put you down or criticize others, refusing to help or do things that make you feel exploited, or simply ending the conversation when you feel your energy is being drained. You don't need to give lengthy explanations for your reasons. Simply say, "I'm not comfortable talking about this," or "I need to go now." Setting boundaries may cause a reaction from them. They may feel threatened, rejected, and will try to pull you back with emotional manipulation, guilt, playing the victim. This is when you need to stand firm. Boundaries are not to punish them, but to protect you. Remember why you are doing this: for your own mental health and energy. Prepare for loneliness, because it will come, and it is frightening, but it also heals. In the void left by these people, something new can emerge. Your strength, your authenticity, your autonomy. When you distance yourself from those who drain you, you reconnect with yourself. Initial loneliness can be uncomfortable, but it is an opportunity to rediscover yourself, what truly matters to you, and to build healthier relationships in the future. Relationships based on respect, mutual support, and shared growth rather than manipulation and energy draining. Be careful. Distancing is only half the journey. The other half is what you do after that, because cutting the tie is the beginning. True transformation happens when you fill that empty space with something that truly strengthens you. This can be spending time on yourself, pursuing hobbies, connecting with healthy and supportive friends, seeking support from a professional, like a therapist, or simply learning to enjoy your own company. When you stop expending energy dealing with toxic people, you will have more energy for yourself and for positive things. That is when the real process of healing and growth begins. The echo of absence. Liberating yourself. What happens when you leave? What happens to those who were used to using you as a mirror, a shield, an emotional crutch? The silence you leave behind echoes. It echoes in the minds of those who exploited you. And that echo is unbearable for those who never learned to deal with their own emptiness. Because suddenly you are no longer there to absorb their projections, to alleviate their guilt, to carry the responsibility that was never yours. Suddenly the game is over and the other person finds themselves facing what they always avoided at all costs, themselves. That is what your departure reveals. Absence is more powerful than any confrontation. Because when you disappear, the other is forced to look at what they always hid behind your presence. And then the truth emerges. That love was control. That affection was possession. That admiration was envy. And the bond was a prison. But this process is not just about the other person. Above all, it is about you. About reclaiming your energy, rebuilding your identity, breaking away from the role you were forced to play. When you choose to leave draining relationships, you begin to inhabit your own life with more awareness. You start to say no without guilt, to listen to yourself, to prioritize yourself, to trust your intuition again. That voice that always knew the truth but that you ignored out of fear. The truth is that you owe nothing to those who tried to diminish you. What you owe is to yourself, respect, clarity, strength. And from the moment you refuse to continue dancing the dance of emotional manipulation, you regain control, you free yourself. This is a continuous journey requiring vigilance and commitment to yourself. There will be times when you feel doubt, loneliness, or even want to return to the familiar, even if toxic. But remember why you started. Remember the price of staying. The liberation of yourself from subtly toxic relationships is not a final destination, but a part of the ongoing process of individuation, the process of becoming your most complete and authentic self. It is about constantly exploring your own shadow, understanding the unconscious patterns that are driving you, and making conscious choices to live a life aligned with your core values. You deserve to have healthy relationships based on love, respect, and mutual support. And to have that, sometimes you have to bravely cut the ties that are holding you back. So if this video and this extended essay truly resonated with you, leave a comment. Tell me, what was the moment you realized someone close was draining your energy? When did the penny drop? Sharing your story can help others who are still trapped in this invisible cycle. Let's transform this space into a place of awareness, not of complicit silence. And if this resonated within you, don't stop here. The process of liberation has started now. But it is far from over, and you deserve to see it through to the end. Keep seeking understanding. Keep reflecting. Keep acting to protect your energy and spirit. Remember, stepping out of your comfort zone may hurt, but staying in it costs you your soul. Choose the discomfort of truth. Choose your freedom. Start that journey today. Share your thoughts below, and together, we can shine a light on these hidden corners and find our way to healthier, more authentic relationships.